Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going to try to unpack this whole situation with Mahmoud Khalil, the grad student at Columbia who was arrested. You guys sent in a ton of articles on this, and it seems like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it is a complicated one for sure, and it touches on so many hot-button issues, like free speech on campus, what even counts as support for terrorism these days, and even basic immigration law. It's a lot.
So maybe we should just start at the beginning. Can you give us a quick rundown of what actually happened?
Sure. So Mahmoud Khalil was just hanging out at his apartment on a Saturday night, and all of a sudden, ICE agents show up.
ICE agents, wow. That's intense.
Yeah, and it gets crazier. They actually told his lawyer they were there to revoke his student visa.
His student visa.
Right, but that's the thing. He doesn't even have a student visa. He has a green card, meaning he's a legal permanent resident of the U.S., detaining a green card holder without any charges. That's basically unheard of.
So what's the deal then? Why did they even go after him in the first place?
Well, a Homeland Security spokesperson connected the arrest to President Trump's executive orders on anti-Semitism. And then the Secretary of State goes on X talking about revoking visas and green cards of anyone in the U.S. who supports Hamas, even suggesting they could be deported.
Wow, things escalated quickly. But what exactly ties Khalil to Hamas?
And that's the million-dollar question, right? And just so everyone's on the same page, Hamas is that Palestinian Islamist group that the U.S., the EU, and a bunch of other countries consider a terrorist organization.
Right, got it.
Okay, so the government is pointing to his activities at Columbia as evidence. Like they're saying he organized all these pro-Palestinian protests there.
Oh, yeah, he was super involved in that stuff, right? He even helped negotiate during that whole encampment they had on campus.
Exactly. And to make things even more complex, he was also under investigation by this brand new university office that was specifically created to look into pro-Palestinian activism.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. What were they investigating him for?
So they're accusing him of a few things. Mainly that he organized events without permission, posted criticisms of Zionism on social media, and might have even glorified that Hamas attack from last October.
Zionism, right.
Yeah.
That's the movement to create a Jewish state in Israel, which obviously is a really controversial topic, especially when you talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Khalil completely denies all of those accusations. He's saying a lot of the social media posts they're linking to him weren't even his. He basically thinks he's being targeted because of his political opinions.
Which, if true, is a really scary thought.
It is. And his lawyer is on the same page, calling the whole arrest retaliatory. They're saying it's straight up violating his First Amendment rights.
Makes sense. I mean, freedom of speech and assembly, those are pretty fundamental rights here in the U.S.
Absolutely. And what's even crazier is that this is all happening at the same time the Trump administration is going after student activists who support Palestine. They've basically said that this kind of support could get you kicked out of the country.
And they're not just talking, right? They even cut funding to Columbia University, saying they weren't doing enough to handle anti-Semitism on campus.
You got it. So you have Khalil caught in this crazy situation. The government's saying he's basically a terrorist sympathizer. And Khalil's over here saying he's just exercising his right to free speech.
It's like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. And that's why this case is so important. We need to figure out, can just expressing support for Palestine, even if you're really critical of Israel, get you detained or even deported, even if you're a legal resident? That sets a wild precedent.
It really does make you wonder what this means for anyone involved in this conflict, especially if they're living or studying here in the U.S.
For sure. It goes way beyond just Khalil at this point. It could impact how the U.S. government treats any kind of activism related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict going forward.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is. We need to look at this from all sides, and I think that's a perfect place to leave things for now. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into the legal arguments in this case and what this could mean for free speech on campuses all across the country.
Okay, so we're back. And before we really get into all the legal stuff, it's important to remember that Khalil has a green card, right? He's not here on some temporary visa. That actually makes a huge difference in how this whole thing might play out.
That's true. And honestly, I'm not even sure I fully understand what a green card means in terms of, someone's legal status here. Could you break that down for us?
Sure. So a green card basically means you're a lawful permanent resident of the U.S. It means you can live and work here for as long as you want. It's not citizenship, but it's pretty close.
Got it.
And the government can take away your green card, of course, and then try to deport you. But that usually only happens for really specific reasons, like if you commit some serious crimes.
So is that what's happening with Khalil? Are they saying his alleged support for Hamas is like a crime? Well, that's the tricky part, right? They're saying he supported a terrorist organization, which sounds bad, obviously. But here's the thing. They haven't actually charged him with anything.
Oh.
Like, he's been detained, and they're threatening to take away his green card, but it's all based on what they think he did, not on, actual proof that he broke any laws.
So his lawyer's argument that this whole thing is violating his First Amendment rights, that's kind of where that comes in, right? Like he
Yeah.
was just protesting, expressing his political views, which you're allowed to do in the U.S.
Exactly. And that's where things get really complicated. It's this whole debate about national security versus individual rights. Like, yeah, the government needs to protect people from terrorism, obviously. But when does that start to mess with people's basic constitutional rights?
Yeah, it's a tough question because just speaking your mind about something like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can get you in trouble with the government. Even if you haven't done anything illegal, that's a slippery slope.
It is. And it could end up scaring people away from any kind of activism, not just about Palestine. Think about it. What if you're protesting against an oil company or fighting for workers' rights? They could twist that and call you a threat to national security, too, if they wanted to.
That's a terrifying thought. So this whole case with Khalil, it could actually end up silencing a lot of people who are fighting for important causes.
It really could.
Yeah.
And speaking of silencing people, we haven't even talked about what Columbia University did here. They had their own investigation going on, totally separate from the government's actions. Remember they were looking into those pro-Palestinian events in his social media posts?
Right. It's weird, though, because universities are supposed to be places where you can talk about anything, right? Are they supposed to protect free speech?
They're supposed to be, yeah. But lately we've seen more and more universities getting pressured to, police what people say, especially when it comes to these really controversial topics.
It seems like a tough position for them to be in. They want to make sure everyone feels safe and included, but they also shouldn't be shutting down debates or punishing students just for having opinions, even unpopular ones.
Yeah, exactly. And then you throw in the fact that the government cut their funding because they supposedly weren't doing enough about anti-Semitism. It adds another layer of complexity. Like, are universities now going to have to follow specific political agendas just to keep their funding? What happens to academic freedom then?
So much to think about. Okay, so we've got this legal fight happening, possible violations of constitutional rights, and universities caught in the middle of it all. What does this all mean moving forward?
Honestly, it's hard to say right now. This whole thing is still playing out, and how it ends could change how we think about activism in the U.S. And not just about this conflict, but about any cause that the government might decide to target.
It feels like a really crucial moment. This story is far from over, and the impact could go way beyond what happens to Mahmoud Khalil.
Absolutely. We need to keep looking at the big picture here. And to do that, I think we should shift gears now and talk about what this arrest could mean for other pro-Palestinian activists, particularly those on college campuses all over the country.
It's definitely a lot to process. I mean, we've been talking about Mahmoud Khalil's arrest at Columbia, but what about everyone else? What does this whole situation mean for other people who are, active in supporting Palestine, especially students on other campuses?
Honestly, I think it's a really scary message for them. Like, imagine you're a student, you care about this issue, you're involved in activism, and then you see this happen to another student, someone who's a legal resident, just like you. It makes you think twice,
Oh, for sure. Like, could I be next?
Yeah.
Especially if you're someone who's been really vocal about supporting Palestine.
Exactly. And it's not even just about Palestine, right? This could affect anyone who's involved in activism around, like any international conflict where the U.S. government's taken a side. Say you're fighting for human rights in some country the U.S. doesn't like. Boom, suddenly your visa status is in question just because your views line up with the wrong group.
It's kind of messed up that just expressing your opinion could put your whole life here at risk. Like just for speaking your mind.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up. And the thing is, it discourages people from even thinking critically about these issues, from having open discussions. And those are the kinds of things that are supposed to be good for a democracy, right?
Right. And Khalil even said in one of those articles that he felt like Colombia was trying to, shut down pro-Palestine voices. What happens if that starts happening everywhere?
It's a good question. I mean, think about it. Less students getting involved in these debates, less perspectives being shared, it makes everyone less informed, right? And then we can't have these important conversations about foreign policy and stuff because no one even knows what's going on.
It's like the more polarized things get, the less space there is for actual nuance and discussion.
Yeah.
People get scared to say anything that falls outside, like a super narrow range of acceptable opinions, because they're afraid of being labeled or attacked or, worst case scenario, deported.
Yeah, exactly. And that shrinking of what's okay to talk about, that's a huge problem. It means we can't actually deal with complex issues in a complex way. Everything gets simplified, and that just leads to more division.
So is there anything we can do about this? Like, as people who care about these issues, how do we fight back against this trend and make sure that everyone's voice can be heard?
Honestly, I think the first step is just being aware of what's going on, like we're doing right now. Understanding these legal precedents, the potential impacts on free speech, seeing the bigger picture. Knowledge is power, right?
So true.
And then we need to take action, supporting groups that are fighting for civil liberties, pushing for policies that protect free speech on campus, calling out people who try to silence others, stuff like that.
And I think maybe the most important thing is to actually talk to each other, right? Like, even if we disagree about stuff, we need to be able to have respectful conversations with people who have different opinions.
Absolutely. Actually, listen to what they have to say, try to understand their perspective, see if you can find some common ground. It's not always easy, especially these days, but it's so important if we want to have a democracy that actually works.
So this whole situation with Khalil, it's still unfolding. We don't know how it's going to end. But even if he wins his case, even if he gets to stay in the U.S., the impact of what happened is already huge.
For sure. It's a wake-up call for all of us. It reminds us that we can't take our freedoms for granted, especially these basic rights like free speech and open discussion, especially when things are as tense as they are now.
Well, we started this deep dive trying to figure out what was happening at Colombia. We looked at the arrest, heard different sides of the story, got into the legal stuff, and talked about what this could mean for the future.
And as we wrap up, I think the biggest question is, how will this case affect how the U.S. deals with activism about international conflicts going forward? Will it become even harder to speak out? Or could this be a chance to have a much bigger conversation about the balance between national security and individual rights?
That's a question we all need to think about. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll keep following this story and let you know what happens.